Hello and welcome back to the Anime Asylum, the only podcast where we talk about your favorite animes, legally required to. Now, I have a bit of a cold today, so this might be a shorter episode, but I figured we'd cover the first season of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. That would be covering Phantom Blood and Battle Tendency if we have enough time. So let's just dive right into it. For those of you who don't know, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a 90s manga that just recently got an anime adaptation in, well, I say recently, but it was like 2012. And the series is currently, the manga and the anime are currently ongoing. So we, if we ever get that far, we might catch up to the series as it's coming out. But let's just get right into it. So starting out with Phantom Blood. Phantom Blood sets up a bit of prequel for the entire series. These first two seasons are called the Hammond era, as they're completely different from the entire rest of the story. They focus on more martial arts and your more traditional anime type fights, as opposed to the more bizarre stuff that comes later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just get into the story. So, this series starts out with Dario Brando saving one George Joestar, or kind of saving. He was gonna rob him, but George Joestar woke up just in time. So Dario had to play it off like he was doing a good thing. So George decides to help Dario by adopting his son, Dio, when Dario is on his deathbed. So Dio goes to live with George and his son, Jonathan Joestar, we will be calling Jojo. All the protagonists in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure are called Jojo, but this one specifically is uh, called Jojo the most, so he gets the official moniker of Jojo. So Dio, he looks like a good guy, but then we subtly get a hint that he's maybe not a good guy because he kicks jo- Jojo's dog in the face as soon as he arrives. And Dio begins from that point on to make Jojo's life a living hell. He beats him up, he turns his friends against him, he kisses his girlfriend, he lights Jojo's dog on fire, your typical bully things. And it's just hell. Eventually, they kind of get along. Like 7 years later, they start to get along. They're on the football team together, so they ha they at least set aside their differences for a little bit, but it turns out Dio was actually poisoning George and he was being good in order to get the inheritance. It's because he was born poor and he just wants all the money. He has no good bone in him. He is all for himself. So Jonathan finds this out and he's like, "What the fuck, Dio? I thought we were cool." And Dio's like, "Nah, bro. I'm gonna go continue to kill your dad and there's nothing you can do about it because the poison I'm using doesn't really look like anything but a normal sickness." So Jonathan goes to London to go and find a cure, and he finds one in Chinatown. But as he's heading back to his house, he gets attacked by some gangsters. And these gangsters, they include one of the best characters in this entire series, one REO Speedwagon. I should probably tell you this, but every single character in JoJo is named after a song. Dio is a band, REO Speedwagon's a band. Uh, Pretty much, if you can find a character, there's a song related to it or a band. So Speedwagon and his gangsters attack Jojo, but then Jojo's like, I don't know, he's pretty cool or something. So he gets to, so Speedwagon's like, hey, maybe we don't attack him because he's so cool. And they end up, Speedwagon calls them all off and decides to travel with Jojo back home to see if he can help subdue Dio because Dio was being a bit violent earlier. So Jojo goes back and he gets Dio arrested, but Dio tries to, instead of going quietly, he stabs at Jojo, but Jojo's dad blocks him. And during that, there's there's this old mask that is in the Jojo household. And what after George is stabbed, his blood gets on the mask, and it turns out the mask is some ancient Aztec relic which can turn you into a vampire. So Dio gets the mask and he turns himself into a vampire. And he gets shot at and he by some cops who are there and but it doesn't do anything. He just kills all the cops. So Jojo has to, defeat him. So he lights the entire mansion on fire that he and Dio have been living in for 7 years, and he destroys everything in an attempt to kill Dio. But Dio just won't let up. So he and Jojo are trying to escape through the chimney, but Jojo won't let him. So he grabs onto Dio and plunges him onto a statue in the mansion, stabbing him and assuming he he thought he'd killed Dio, but Dio survives his whole encounter and gets comes back to life by draining the blood of a scavenger who was looking through the mansion. So Jojo later on, like a week later, after recovering from his injuries, he finds out Dio's not dead, but he he can't be defeated through normal means like fire or guns or stabbed. So a man named Will Pelly seeks out Jojo and after hearing of Dio's incident and shows him how to defeat Dio through the process of Hammond, which is a special breathing technique which infuses your body with the power of the sun. And as we all know, sun is the only thing that can kill vampires. Uh, Disregard all the other things that have been known to kill vampires. Only the sun can kill them. So they Jojo, Spelly, and Speedwagon, they have to travel to a castle where Dio is staying at. So they get to the outskirts of the castle to a small village, and Dio has turned most of the villagers into zombies. However, these don't prove much of a problem because they can be defeated fairly easily by just punching them. How, However, as they get closer, Dio summons two zombie knights to go and fight them, and the knights are pretty cool because they decide we should do it on one-on-one combat because they got chivalry and stuff. So no, not Dio, sorry, Jojo and the first knight called Bruford, who is a more agile and swordsman-like knight, fight to the death in so they Jojo grabs onto Dio to Bruford and plunges him into the river that's nearby and uses his Hammond to go use sorry about he uses his Hammond to conduct underwater and cause Bruford to die. Bruford se sees how as he's dying, he gets a conscious and he's like, "Hey Jojo, you should get this cool ass sword I have." But as right after Jojo gets the sword, which has been dubbed Pluck, the other knight, who is a big brute enemy with like a mace and stuff, attacks, and they don't fare as well against the other guy. So every they run away and they end up in a little bit of a dungeon that's nearby. And Jojo gets trapped by some ancient torture mechanism that only allows like two people are chained together and they have to balance it out. So Tarkus is chained to one end and Jojo's on the other, and Tarkus, the knight, is just beating him up using the chain because Jojo can't reach him because he's not strong enough. So Zappelli sacrifices himself and gives Jojo enough his Hammond so that he can defeat Tarkus and using that, he kills Tarkus, and they go on to reach Dio's castle, which is full of zombies. They they meet a couple of other Hammond masters who help them purge the zombies from there, and they reach Dio's sanctum. Now Dio has a lot of cool powers because he's a zombie. He has ice powers, he's got flying, he can do a bunch of stuff. He's near invincible. So one of the Hammond Masters tries to attack Dio, but he just gets his arms frozen. So Jonathan, using the sword, he imbues it with Hammond, and he impales Dio in the eye. Thus, but it doesn't do enough damage. However, later, Dio freezes Jonathan's arms. Sorry, I'm getting myself mixed up. It's been a while since I watched this. So Dio, he stabs Dio with the Hammond sword, and it does a lot of damage. But then it didn't do enough. So he waits for Dio to freeze his arms, and then he uses his Hammond to use his sword to cut off Dio's arms and his head, which is enough to defeat him once and for all. And so Dio's body disintegrates, and his head, which is the only thing that's left, falls off a cliff that's nearby as it slowly melts away. However, well, no, not however. After the battle, Jojo, he gets married. He decides to go to America because, land of opportunity. So they take a small steamboat cruise there. But during their travels, it turns out Dio is still alive. His head was the only thing that survived him, barely. But he's still alive, and he attacks Jojo as just a head, and he's able to cause enough damage to the ship mechanism that it's about to explode. And jo Dio is going to use a baby to be his new body, but Jojo is able to hold on to Dio's head long enough and let Arena and the baby get into a blast-proof case in order to make sure that they don't go explode with the ship. So Dio and Jojo both die in a massive explosion, but Arena and the baby survive, and they are able to reach America and live relatively happy lives for the rest of their days. So then fast forward, I'd say about 60 years. It's about World War I, World War II era now. So we find a new JoJo, this one called Joseph Joestar, and he's a bit of a delinquent. He lives in New York, and he's a, a bit of a prankster, a bit of a gangster. He likes to mess around. Speedwagon has become immensely rich and off of oil, and Joseph uses all of Speedwagon's money to get into various hijinks like crashing planes or shooting up cafes which have vampires in them. Now Joseph, he has Hammond, but he's not very good at it right yet. So he gets attacked by vampires, and he is able to defeat them, but barely. And it turns out the vampires aren't the true threat because back in the ancient Aztec era, there's like a ton of masks, but those are all modeled off of some ancient pillar men, which are like vampires times 10. So the masks turn you into a vampire, but the pillar men created the masks so that they could have vampire armies. So Jojo travels, Joseph travels to the place where all the masks are being held, which is in Mexico, and he is able to destroy all the masks. However, there's a Pillar Man, which are thought to be extinct, is being held by the Germans in an underground base they have. So he travels down to that base, and the Pillar Man, they were experimenting on it, and while I'm pretty sure they're Nazis, were experimenting on the Pillar Man, it escaped while Jojo was there. So the Pillar Man kills most of the Nazis except for one named Stroheim, which is the leader, the general of the Nazis, and the Pillar Man, whose name is Santana, he is almost able to escape into the outside world and start a massive massacre. However, Jojo is able to trick him by throwing him out into the sunlight, which is again the one of the only weaknesses for these vampire-like creatures, and is able to turn him into stone. So this is not Santana is not the only Pillar Man. There's a there are three more which are underneath Italy, uh, Rome specifically, and those ones are being held by UV lights which are able to simulate the sun. However, as Joseph and Speedwagon go to check on them with a guy named Caesar, who is the descendant of Will Zillepelli, they begin to awake and they come to life. And Jojo and Caesar, they put up a good fight, but they're just not strong enough yet. But Jojo is he's such a cool dude that the Pillar Men decide, hey, we're not gonna kill you yet. We're gonna let you get a little bit of training in, but in like 50 days, if you don't come and fight us, you're gonna die of a poison that we've put in your bloodstream. So Jojo and Caesar, they have to seek out a trainer. And there's this one in Venice called Lisa, and she's been training Hammond users for like 50 years. She trained Zappelli and some other dudes. So they go and see her, and she won't train them at first, but she puts them through this test where they have to climb a pillar that's constantly full of water. And you can use Hammond to kind of make a foothold for yourself, but it takes a long time and a lot of energy. So Caesar and Jojo, they Caesar does it the correct way, and Jojo does a bit of a flip up the pillar. He kind of jumps out, doesn't do it properly, but he's cool, so it's fine. So then she agrees to train them. So they train for the next 40 to 50 days, but as they're getting ready for their final tests, one of the pillar men, ACDC, decides that he's just gonna go and attack them already because Lisa has a gem which will be able to turn them into the ultimate being. So he attacks Jojo during his final test, and Jojo is able to outsmart him using some string, but he isn't able to kill him fully using his Hammond. So the ACDC, he takes over the body of one of Lisa's assistants and is able to steal the gem and ship it off to he mails it over to his dudes in Rome. Yeah, in Rome. So they Caesar and Joseph, they're able to kill ACDC, but it's already too late, so they have to go chase after the gem. And so they are able to catch up to it in the mountains. Some mountains. I think it's the Alps. But there they meet Kars and Stroheim, who has been upgraded with German technology to have a machine gun in his chest. So Stroheim, Caesar, and Jojo, they fight another Pillar Man named Kars, who has blades in his arms. And they Kars has the stone, but they are able to steal it from him, barely. Jojo manages to knock it off a cliff and grab it before Kars can get it. So then they continue. So Kars heads back to Rome for their final fight, but Caesar isn't content with just waiting for the fight in like 3 days, so he goes off alone because the Pillarmen were technically the cause of his father's death. So Caesar goes after them alone, but he's killed pretty much instantly by the third Pillarman, Wamu. Uh, but during that, he's able to get the cure from Wamu and deliver it to Jojo. But Jojo decides to be a Chad and not take the cure until after he's defeated Wamu because, fair fight and all. So he so Jojo and Lisa they reach the Colosseum where the final fight's about to go down. And Jojo he's able to defeat Wamu using Caesar's headband, which he's able which he keeps as a memento, and some oil, which he lights on fire, and that causes Wamu to explode. However, then Lisa challenges Cars to a battle so that Jojo won't just instantly be killed after his fight. But Cars, he plays dirty, and he decides to use his hair, which has been tied up all this time, as like he uses it as like a trip rope, and he's able to tie up Lisa and dangle her over a cliff. So Jojo confronts Cars, and he's able to save Lisa, but Cars gets the gem and is able to become the ultimate being, which just means he can shapeshift into whatever he wants and control things and basically he's just a shapeshifter now, and he's lost his weakness as sunlight. So Jojo, he begins running away because there's not much you can do against the ultimate being. However, Cars chases after him. So Jojo boards a plane and continues to lure Cars away from everyone else, and he ends up in a volcano, and that volcano explodes, erupts, and it launches Jojo and Cars, all the way up into the stratosphere. And Cars is just killing, he's beating Jojo to a pulp. But Jojo is able to distract him just long enough for Cars to get hit by some debris from the volcano. That launches Cars into space, where uh, he turns to stone so he can survive in the harsh conditions of space. But he he just stays as a stone in space. He never comes back down. He's never mentioned again. He is completely and utterly devoid of thought after a while. Now Jojo is assumed dead, but it turns out he survived the eruption somehow. I believe the Nazis found his body and were able to cure him and replace the arm he lost with a robot arm. So he comes back. In one last prankster move, he attends his own funeral, and it turns out he got married in like in the week where they set up his funeral. He somehow recovered from his injuries, got married, and traveled back to America. And that's where the end of the Hammond series is. Jo- Joseph eventually has a daughter who has a son who is the protagonist of the next series, which is Stardust Crusaders. But that is a story for another time. Anyway, I hope you all had fun listening. I this the Hammond series is it's a it's an interesting part of the JoJo series. I, for one, personally enjoy this little bit of an arc. It's really short compared to the rest of the series, but Battle Tendency is probably my favorite part of all of JoJo. and there's a lot of good parts in JoJo. Uh, we'll see if that stays the case after Part 7 gets released. But yeah, for ranking, I'd give this a solid 4 Sex Pistols. If that's a 4 out of 6. So yeah, it's pretty good. Would definitely recommend. Probably not, it's not the best anime, but it's not Naruto, which I will cover one of these days. Anyway, I hope you had fun listening, and that's all for now. Bye.